Madeline Rae was just a music student trying to numb her pain when she overdosed at a college party and died. What happened next defied everything she thought she knew about life, death, and God. Pulled from her body and guided through space by a silent, glowing being, she reached the gates of heaven itself. What she saw there, including strange, angelic creatures and the throne of God, shattered her reality. This is her unbelievable, unforgettable true story.
My name is Madeline Rae. I'm 35 now, living in Ashland, Oregon. I teach music, mostly voice, and I work with teenagers, helping them find their sound. But when I was a kid, I felt like I didn't have a voice at all. I grew up in a small town in Michigan, in a quiet, church-going family. My mom, Judith, was a nurse. My dad, Carl, worked in insurance. They loved me, I know that now, but our house wasn't loud with emotion or affection. We said grace before dinner, went to church on Sundays, and I learned early how to smile and be polite. I was the only child, and I filled my quiet time with books, drawing, and singing to myself in the backyard. I didn't talk much, but I always had music in my head. I think I first became aware of God when I was 7. I was lying in bed staring at the ceiling and suddenly felt like something was watching me, but not in a scary way. It was like someone big and gentle was there, just being present. I didn't hear a voice, but I felt a calm. That night I whispered, "Are you real?" into the dark. I didn't get an answer. But I kept whispering that question for years. At church, I learned about Jesus and heaven. I believed it because I was told to, but it didn't sink in. It felt far away. We sang songs about God's love, and the pastor spoke about salvation, but none of it reached me in a personal way. I thought being a Christian meant being nice and following rules. I didn't understand much beyond that. When I was 13, I started to feel pain in my back that wouldn't go away. At first, I thought I had pulled something, but it got worse. My mom noticed my shoulders looked uneven. We went to the doctor, and after some tests and x-rays, they diagnosed me with severe scoliosis. My spine had a deep S-shaped curve, one that wasn't just cosmetic, it was pressing against my lungs. The doctor said it would only get worse and that I needed surgery. Not later. Now. I remember sitting in the office while he explained it. 16 hours. Rods, screws, spinal fusion. I nodded like I understood, but my hands were cold, and my ears were ringing. I looked over at my mom, who was trying to stay calm, but her jaw was tight. At home, I couldn't sleep. I'd lie in bed thinking about my back being cut open, about waking up and not being able to move. What if something went wrong? What if I didn't wake up at all? My parents tried to comfort me. My dad said things like, "You'll be okay. It's just a surgery." My mom told me the doctors were the best, that they had done it before. But none of it settled the fear in my chest. I felt like I was falling, and nobody could catch me. I started praying more. I didn't know how to pray, not really. I just talked into the air and hoped God was listening. Please let it go well. Please don't let me die. Please be there. A week before the surgery, I asked my pastor what it meant to have faith. He smiled and said, "Faith is trusting even when you don't see the whole picture." I nodded, but I didn't feel any trust. I felt like I was standing at the edge of something I didn't understand. I believed in God, but I didn't know Him. Not really. The night before the surgery, I couldn't stop crying. I tried to keep it quiet so my parents wouldn't hear. My back ached. My stomach hurt from the nerves. I kept thinking about the operating room, the machines, the lights. I was scared of pain, yes, but more than that, I was scared of what would happen if I left my body and there was nothing there. No light. No one waiting. I kept praying, even though it felt like talking to a wall. God, I don't know if you're real. But if you are, don't let me be alone. That was the first time I ever admitted out loud that I was afraid not just of death, but of being forgotten. Being lost. I didn't know it then, but that fear was the beginning of something bigger. The morning of the surgery, I didn't say much. I hugged my mom. My dad held my hand longer than usual. I was wheeled into a room with bright lights and cold air. I remember the anesthesiologist saying, "Just count backwards from 10. I got to 7 before everything went black. I had no idea what was coming. The operating room was cold. That's the last thing I remember before it happened. I was already feeling heavy from the medication, my body slow, my thoughts slipping. I looked up at the bright lights above the table, and then there was nothing. But I didn't stay in that nothing. Not for long. At some point, I became aware that I was no longer lying on the table. I was above it, watching from somewhere near the ceiling. It wasn't like floating in water, more like hovering, still, steady, without effort. I looked down and saw my body. My back was exposed. There were 4 people in the room, dressed in blue scrubs. I remember seeing a metal tray with tools, something that looked like a saw, and clamps. I should have panicked, but I didn't feel scared. I didn't feel anything except a strange calm, as if all the weight of worry had been left behind with my body. There was a light near me, not a spotlight or lamp, but a kind of warm glow. It wasn't blinding. It was inviting. I didn't walk toward it. I was just drawn. Slowly, I moved through the ceiling, through the roof of the hospital, past the sky. And then, just like that, I was somewhere else entirely. It was open. Wide. Soft. There was grass beneath me, but not like any grass I'd seen before. It was bright green, almost electric. It shimmered. I crouched down instinctively to touch it but stopped when I noticed it moving. Each blade swayed gently, though there was no breeze. And they weren't all moving the same. They moved together, but each had its own rhythm. I stared at them, amazed, watching how they bent and straightened. It was as if they were alive. Not just alive like plants here on Earth, but aware. Conscious, in a way. I remember thinking, God must know every single blade of this grass, and immediately, I knew it was true. Then my eyes were pulled toward a garden nearby. I walked slowly, if it could be called walking. My body didn't feel heavy, and my feet didn't make a sound. The flowers were huge, radiant, in colors I had never seen before. Not brighter versions of what we know here, but entirely different. Some had hues I couldn't name. The petals looked like they were glowing from within. As I passed through the garden, the air itself felt full, like it carried love. Not a word, not a thought, just the sense of it. Love in the light, in the colors, in the silence. Beyond the flowers, I noticed a hill with fruit trees. They were heavy with fruit, perfectly shaped and full. The leaves shimmered with gold at the edges, and the trunks looked polished like old wood. But it was the tree in the center that stopped me. It was enormous. It looked older than time. Its branches stretched wide and high, and its bark pulsed like it had a heartbeat. Each branch moved differently, slowly swaying like it was breathing. I stood still, sensing something powerful. Not threatening, but not soft either. This tree held knowledge. Too much, maybe. I wanted to go closer. I had so many questions. But as I stepped toward it, I felt something stop me. Not a voice, not a barrier, just a deep knowing. I could approach the tree, but I should not touch it. I didn't need to be told why. I understood. Still, I walked nearer. There was a hollow in the trunk, like a small doorway, and I peered inside. At first, it looked empty. Then I saw something flicker. An image of a squirrel, not a real one, but a vision, like it had been placed there for me. I thought, how are squirrels made? And the moment I formed the thought, I saw it. It wasn't a voice. It wasn't words. It was like a download straight into my mind. I saw a time-lapse, cells dividing, forming, limbs growing, fur sprouting. I saw the squirrel's entire life cycle, fast but full, and I understood all of it at once. Then I wondered about rabbits. And I saw them, too. Fish. Birds. Every time I asked, I received the answer, not in language, but in pure knowledge. And when I asked about people, I saw our beginnings, how bodies are formed, how spirits enter, how we're shaped by both matter and purpose. It was beautiful and overwhelming. I remember thinking, how can I be learning this much this fast, but it didn't feel rushed. It felt natural, like I'd always been capable of knowing, and something had just opened inside me. I stayed there for what felt like hours, asking, seeing, receiving. Not once did I feel tired or anxious. Just curious. It was as if I had finally been given permission to know the things I had always wanted to understand. After a while, I felt a pull again. A gentle tug, like the end of a visit. I didn't resist it. I looked one last time at the tree, the garden, the glowing flowers. Then I was lifted away. I don't remember the journey back. I just remember blinking and realizing I was back in the hospital, in recovery. My throat was sore, my body felt heavy, and the air around me seemed gray and flat. The nurse was adjusting something near the fore. I blinked slowly. I wanted to tell someone what I'd seen, but I couldn't speak. Not yet. Inside, I felt different. Not just like I'd had a dream, but like I'd seen something that had always been there. Like a curtain had been pulled back. I didn't have the words for it, but I knew it hadn't been just in my head. It had been real. By the time I was 17, the memory of what I saw during surgery had already started to fade around the edges. I didn't forget it, not completely. I just didn't know what to do with it. I had tried to tell a few people, my mom, one close friend, even a youth leader, but the reactions were either overly excited or politely dismissive. My mom said it was probably a dream from the medication. My friend smiled and said it was cool, then never brought it up again. The youth leader told me I was blessed and should pray for guidance, but he didn't really ask for details. I think he was uncomfortable. So I stopped talking about it. And over time, I stopped thinking about it, too. At least on the surface. Inside, it still lived. I would sometimes wake up in the middle of the night remembering the way the grass moved or the light poured from the sky. I'd get this ache in my chest that I couldn't explain. I didn't know it then, but it was homesickness. Not for a place, but for a feeling, the love, the stillness, the knowing. But instead of seeking more of it, I did what most people around me were doing, I buried it. College gave me a clean slate. I got into a music program and moved 3 hours away. For the first time, I was surrounded by people who didn't know anything about me. I thought it would feel free. Instead, I felt like a fraud. I couldn't shake the sense that I was different. It wasn't arrogance. I didn't feel better than anyone. I just couldn't connect. People around me laughed easily, talked about parties and hookups and skipping class. I laughed too, but it was forced. I started going out more just so I wouldn't have to sit in my dorm and think. It started with a little alcohol. A few drinks to relax, to make conversations easier. Then it became more regular. Then someone passed me a joint one night, and I took it without thinking. That was the first time I felt quiet inside in years. All the things that made me feel different, my dreams, my memories, my questions, they all faded. I wasn't thinking about heaven or light or purpose. I was just numb. And I liked it. So I kept doing it. Not every night, but enough to feel like I was in control. I still told myself I believed in God. I didn't stop praying completely. I just kept my faith in a box. I figured, I already saw heaven. I already know it's real. I'm probably fine. I didn't see any harm in drifting. After all, I wasn't hurting anyone. But slowly, something shifted. I stopped writing music. I stopped singing outside of class. I felt disconnected from my own voice. I'd stand in front of a mirror before a performance and barely recognize the girl staring back. I was getting good grades. Professors liked me. People thought I was doing great. But I wasn't. My nights were empty. My mornings were dull. Nothing made me feel the way I used to feel when I sang under the trees at home or read scripture with curiosity. I had filled my life with distractions, but I was starving inside. I didn't know it yet, but I was beginning to run out of ways to keep myself quiet. The light I had once floated in, the peace, the presence, it hadn't gone anywhere. I had just been walking away from it. I was 21 when I died the second time. It happened at a house party in late spring. School was nearly out for the year, and everyone was blowing off steam, alcohol, weed, music too loud for the walls to contain. I'd been to parties before, but something felt different that night. I was already on edge before I even showed up. I'd had a fight with someone earlier that week, and I'd barely eaten all day. But I went anyway. I didn't want to be alone with my thoughts. Again. Someone handed me a red cup. I didn't ask what was in it. Later someone passed around something stronger than weed, maybe laced, maybe not. I didn't ask about that either. I just took it. An hour or so passed in a blur. I couldn't keep up with conversations. My vision started to twist. People's voices got slow and stretchy. My heart was racing, but my arms felt like they were filled with sand. I started to sweat through my shirt. I slipped away from the crowd and found an empty bedroom upstairs. It was dark, quiet. I shut the door behind me and sat on the floor in the corner, pulling my knees to my chest. The walls were spinning. My chest felt tight. I thought maybe I was going to throw up. Maybe I'd pass out for a while and feel better. But then I started to feel like I was falling inward. My body didn't move, but I could feel myself peeling away from it. It wasn't like going to sleep. It was like something had been pulled loose. 1 second I was in my body, and the next I was floating above it, looking down at the girl on the floor. Her face was pale. Her head was resting on her knees, her hair stuck to her forehead with sweat. That girl was me. But I wasn't in her anymore. I wasn't scared. Not like you'd think. I felt a strange calm. Everything around me was quiet, not just in the room, but beyond it. No music. No voices. No heartbeat. Just space. Then, in the upper corner of the ceiling, something appeared. It was a woman. Or at least she looked like one. Tall, graceful, dressed in flowing white that shimmered but didn't shine. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. I knew she was safe. I knew she was there to guide me. She reached out, gently touched my wrist, and in an instant we started to rise. We didn't go through the door or the window, we went up, through the ceiling, through the roof. The house fell away behind us like a toy on a shelf. The air around us shifted. First rooftops. Then the neighborhood. Then streetlights. Then the city. We kept going. Past the sky, past the clouds, through the atmosphere. The higher we went, the more weight I lost. Not physical weight, but emotional. Regret, confusion, shame, it all just fell away behind me like ash. We entered a place that looked like space, but more alive. The stars weren't just lights in the distance, they pulsed with some kind of awareness. They shimmered and shifted in colors I couldn't name. I looked down and saw the earth far below us. A small, spinning blue marble, surrounded by silence. I didn't ask where we were going. I didn't need to. I trusted her. We were headed somewhere holy. The woman never said a word, but I could feel her thoughts like gentle ripples. She wasn't there to answer questions. She was there to take me home, or at least somewhere beyond this world. Time didn't exist the way it does here. I don't know how long we traveled, but at some point, I saw a glow in the distance. Not a star. Not a planet. It was something else. As we moved closer, I realized it was a city. A walled city, white and brilliant. It stood alone, surrounded by light. It wasn't burning bright like the sun, it was soft and alive, pulsing with what felt like joy. The walls were tall and smooth, and I could see gates placed evenly around it. Each gate had its own shimmer, like they were made of crystal and fire at the same time. I knew immediately, this was the city of heaven. Not because someone told me. Not because there was a sign. I just knew. It felt like the love I had known in the garden during my first experience, but stronger. Deeper. As if the love in the garden had been a whisper, and this was the full voice. We moved slowly toward it, and I could see figures at the gates, angels, huge and radiant, standing guard. They weren't frightening, but they had presence. They were powerful. Each one stood beside a large book, flipping through pages as people approached. And there were people. A line of them, stretching long and far, waiting at one of the gates. Some looked young, some old, but they all had the same expression, peace, awe, and a strange kind of anticipation. The woman in white brought me to the end of the line and then stepped back. She still didn't speak, but I felt the message, wait here. I looked ahead, toward the gate, toward the angel checking names, toward the city glowing beyond the walls. I had no idea what would happen next. But I knew, with every part of my being, that I was standing at the edge of something real. And this time I didn't want to go back. The line moved slowly, but nobody seemed to mind. There was no rush, no impatience. Everything felt ordered and calm, like time didn't matter here. The city ahead of us wasn't just glowing. It radiated a kind of peace that made my chest ache in the best way. The walls were smooth, white, almost translucent in some places. They didn't look like stone or metal, more like light that had taken solid form. All around the city were gates, 12 of them, spaced evenly like points on a circle. Each gate was tall and arched, glowing faintly, guarded by angels who towered above everyone. These angels weren't like what I'd pictured from paintings or church windows. They were massive, at least 15 feet tall, with robes that seemed woven from clouds and gold. Their faces were calm, not stern, but there was power in them. Power and authority. They stood beside huge books, so large they rested on stone-like pedestals. Their hands turned the pages carefully, like they were handling something sacred. At the gate I was near, I watched people step forward one by one. The angel would place a hand over the book, and the pages would flip on their own, fast but quiet. Then the angel would run his finger down the page, pause, and either nod or say something I couldn't hear. The person would then walk through the gate. Some wept with joy. Others smiled softly. But none of them turned back. I stood near the end of the line, watching, trying to understand what was happening. No one around me looked confused. They all seemed to know this was right, like this was the final step in a journey they'd been preparing for their whole lives. I felt out of place, not afraid, but unsure. I wasn't even sure how I got there, only that I had been brought. The longer I stood there, the more I felt drawn toward the city itself. Not to enter, but to see more. There was a pull in my chest, a curiosity I couldn't ignore. I looked around, no one stopped me. And slowly drifted away from the line, toward one of the outer walls. Up close, the wall shimmered even more. It wasn't solid the way we think of solid. It was almost like it was made of living light. I moved up slightly, just enough to peek over the top. And what I saw inside took my breath away. There were buildings, tall, bright, perfect in shape, but not made of stone or wood. They looked like they were formed from color and sound. I know that sounds strange, but that's the best way I can describe it. The roofs shimmered with blues and golds that shifted as I watched. There were walkways and open courtyards filled with people. I couldn't hear their voices, but I could feel their joy. The grass inside was like the garden I'd seen years before, bright green, alive, moving slightly as if it breathed. Flowers bloomed everywhere, huge and glowing in colors I still can't describe. Water flowed through narrow streams, clear and sparkling, like liquid light. Everything inside the city felt connected. It was like the city itself was alive, breathing with the presence of God. As I looked deeper, I felt something stir in me, a recognition, like I belonged to this place somehow. I wasn't just visiting. I was being reminded of something I had always known but forgotten. The closer I leaned toward the wall, the more I felt the presence. It wasn't a breeze or a sound, but a weightless warmth pressing gently against my chest. It was love, not the kind you get in passing, not even the kind that comes from family. This love knew every piece of me, even the parts one had tried to hide. And it welcomed me anyway. I wanted to go in. I wanted to walk through those gates and never come back. But I also knew, I wasn't here to stay. I floated back from the wall and returned to the line, which had moved forward while I was gone. A few more people had joined behind me. No one questioned where I'd been. But I could feel something had shifted. I had seen too much now to forget. I looked again at the angel at the gate. His presence was strong and quiet, like an immovable mountain. His eyes, when they lifted, didn't miss anything. They saw beyond skin, beyond history. They saw truth. I didn't know it yet, but the truth was about to look straight at me. As I stood back in line, I kept glancing toward the wall I had just floated above. Something in me wasn't finished. The city was calling, not in words, not even in thoughts. Just a pull, quiet but certain, like a whisper that had always been there and now refused to be ignored. Then it happened. I didn't move, but suddenly I was moving. It was as if my spirit had been taken by the hand and led, not by force, but by invitation. In an instant, I was no longer standing near the gates. I was being drawn deep into the city, up a brilliant path that shimmered like glass with veins of gold and flickers of rainbow light running through it. As I rose along this path, everything got brighter, not the kind of brightness that hurts your eyes, but one that fills you. I felt more awake than I'd ever felt, like my whole soul had opened. The path led to an enormous archway, and I passed through it into a vast open space. And there he was. Not a figure. Not a man. Not something I could explain. Just a presence, an overwhelming, undeniable presence, pure light, radiating in all directions. It wasn't like the sun or a spotlight. It didn't cast shadows. It filled everything. I knew it was God. There was no question, no wondering, no hesitation. The moment I saw that light, I knew. It was power. It was majesty. But more than anything, it was love. Infinite love. Love so deep and full that I didn't just feel it, I became part of it. I couldn't see a face. There wasn't one. But the light held everything, wisdom, mercy, strength, and goodness too big for words. I didn't need to see anything else to understand. This was the source. The beginning and the end. The center of all things. To the side of the light was a throne, and beside it stood Jesus. He didn't look like the pictures I'd grown up with, he wasn't pale or soft. He radiated gentleness, but also strength. His eyes held something I couldn't describe. They saw straight through me, yet didn't judge. He didn't speak either, but I could feel what he was saying. I know you. I've always known you. On the other side of the throne, I noticed something that stopped me. Creatures. Not human. Not close. They had wings, not like birds, but layers of them, moving in slow, endless patterns. Their bodies shifted like liquid light, and they had eyes. So many eyes. All over. Watching in every direction, never blinking. Their presence was overwhelming, almost strange to the point of discomfort. But not evil. Just other. I remember thinking, why are there aliens in heaven? That's how they looked to me. Like beings from another dimension. And in a way, they were. They didn't move like us, didn't carry human expression, but they were filled with purpose. I later understood they were angels, seraphim, the ones spoken about in scripture, the ones who surround God's throne and never stop worshipping. And that's what was happening all around me. Worship. Thousands upon thousands of beings filled the space, all facing the light, all crying out the same words in rhythm that felt like thunder and wind and music combined. Holy, holy, holy are you, Lord God Almighty. It didn't sound rehearsed. It sounded like truth being spoken over and over again, because there were no other words big enough to contain what they were feeling. I saw people too, countless souls. Bowing, standing, lifting their hands. Some were silent, some were singing. But all were focused completely on the presence before them. Nothing else mattered. No one looked at each other. No one needed anything but him. The angels, the beings, the light, it all surrounded the throne, swirling in waves of movement and sound. But nothing clashed. It was perfect unity. Complete order. Not rigid, not dull. Alive. Bursting with energy, yet fully at peace. I felt small, but not in a shameful way. More like a drop in the ocean that suddenly understands it belongs there. I didn't speak out loud, but the question rose in me like breath, where is God? And immediately, without moving, I was answered. Right here. Not just in the throne. Not just in the light. But everywhere. In the praise. In the creatures. In the gold beneath my feet. In the warmth inside me. God wasn't there. God was. My whole being understood in that moment what no words could teach. God didn't exist in a location. He was the atmosphere. The core. The rhythm that held everything together. The love I felt wasn't coming from him. It was him. My spirit expanded. That's the only way I can describe it. It was like something inside me stretched wide enough to hold what I was being shown. Clarity filled me, not in ideas or facts, but in pure knowing. I understood that this was what I had always been made for. To know this love, to live in this light, to worship not because I was told to, but because nothing else would ever satisfy. I don't know how long I stood there. Time had no meaning. But I would have stayed forever if I could. And maybe that's why what happened next caught me off guard. Because it wasn't the end. It was only the beginning of something else. I don't know how I got back to the line. One moment I was in the throne room, surrounded by worship and light, and the next I was back outside the gates, standing right where I'd been before. The ground beneath me felt different now, less like a place and more like a pause. Like I'd stepped out of something too holy to stay in. Everything was the same. The gates. The line. The massive angel flipping through the book. But I wasn't the same. I looked down at my hands. They looked the same too, but I could feel something had shifted inside me. I was carrying what I had seen, what I had felt. It was in my chest now, humming like a quiet bell. I understood more than I ever had before, yet I also felt smaller than ever. Not in fear, but in truth. I had just stood in the presence of God. And somehow, I was still me. I took a breath, though it wasn't the same as breathing on earth. It was more like receiving air rather than pulling it in. And I waited, calm but alert. Then the angel at the gate stopped. He had just finished checking someone in, someone who stepped forward and passed through the glowing entrance with a look of joy so deep it made my heart ache. But the angel didn't move on to the next name. Instead, he looked up. Directly at me. His eyes were sharper than before. Focused. He tilted his head, almost like he was trying to remember something. Then he held his hand above the book again, and the pages began flipping rapidly, faster than I thought was possible. Dozens, hundreds of pages turned, all without him touching a thing. He held his hand steady, and suddenly the pages stopped. Near the back. He scanned it. His finger moved down the page. He looked up at me again. Then came the words. "Why are you here?" They weren't angry. They weren't loud. But they struck harder than any shout could have. "You're not supposed to be here yet." It felt like the entire line went silent. Or maybe just inside me. My thoughts dropped out of my head, and I stared at him, wide-eyed, trying to understand. I didn't answer. I couldn't. He stared at me a second longer. Then he lifted his right arm. It stretched upward, longer than any limb should be able to go. His hand opened wide, and in a sudden movement, one that happened so fast I didn't have time to react, he reached toward me. He grabbed me, right around the middle, and in one swift motion, threw me backward. Not physically. Not with muscles. But with something far more powerful. Like being pulled through space by a giant hand made of light and gravity and decision. I didn't fall through the sky or clouds. I shot straight down, like a soul-sized comet, moving so fast the stars blurred past me. I didn't feel pain, but I did feel force. Immense, unstoppable force. Then, impact. I crashed into my body like being dropped into concrete. I gasped. My mouth opened before I even knew it. My eyes snapped wide. My chest rose so hard it hurt. I was back. Back on the bedroom floor, in that dark upstairs room, my knees still pulled to my chest. Sweat soaked through my clothes. My arms tingled. My head spun. I could hear the dull thump of music from downstairs. A muffled laugh. The soft hum of life continuing like nothing had happened. But everything had happened. I was still high. Still buzzing from whatever I had taken. My hand shook. My stomach rolled. But something deeper had changed. I felt raw. Like my soul had been scraped open and then sewn back together with something I didn't have before. I sat there for a long time, breathing in shallow bursts, my mind racing. Not about the drugs. Not even about the party. But about the question the angel had asked me. Why are you here? I didn't know yet. But I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't supposed to be. You'd think an experience like that would have changed me overnight. You'd think I would have walked out of that party, cleaned myself up, and never looked back. But that's not what happened. Not right away. For a while, I didn't even tell anyone. I wasn't sure how. I didn't have the words for what I'd seen, what I'd felt. Even when the memory was still fresh, it felt fragile, like something I had to protect. I told myself I needed time. Time to figure it out, to process it. But really, I was afraid. Afraid of what it would mean if I admitted the truth. I kept using. Not as heavily, but enough to stay numb. Enough to keep the memories from crowding in too close. I kept going to class. I performed in recitals. I got compliments. I smiled in all the right places. From the outside, nothing had changed. Inside, everything had. But I didn't want to face it. I told myself it was fine. I told myself, if my name was in the book, then I must be okay. I mean, the angel looked it up. He didn't say it wasn't there. He just said I wasn't supposed to be there yet. That had to count for something, right? I used that as a pass. A loophole. I believed in God. I'd seen heaven. I knew it was real. So I figured I was already covered. All that other stuff, repentance, surrender, obedience, it felt like more than I could handle. I wasn't angry at God. I just wanted to live on my own terms. For the next couple of years, I kept drifting. Not far enough to feel like I was lost, but just enough to stay out of reach. I still believed. I still prayed sometimes. But there was always a wall between me and the truth. And then, one night, everything broke. I was 27. My daughter was just over a year old, asleep in the next room. I was sitting alone in my bedroom, folding laundry, mind on autopilot. Life had settled into a rhythm: work, home, parenting. I wasn't partying anymore. I wasn't drinking. But I also wasn't living with purpose. I was just surviving. That night, I felt it again. That pull. The one I'd felt at the city gates. The quiet invitation. I tried to shake it, but it kept growing. My chest felt tight. My breath went shallow. And then I heard it. Clear. Strong. Real. A voice. Not in my head. Not in my thoughts. In the room. It said my name. Madeline. That's it. Just my name. But it was everything. It wasn't loud, but it had weight. It filled the space like thunder, even though it didn't shake a single thing. I froze. My hands stopped moving. The clothes slipped from my lap. I couldn't speak. I knew who it was. No one had to tell me. It was him. The God of the garden. The God of the throne. The one who had known me all along. I dropped to my knees, right there beside the basket of laundry, and I cried like I hadn't cried in years. The kind of crying that comes from a place so deep you forget how long it's been there. My hands trembled. My body shook. I wasn't afraid, not in the usual sense. But I was undone. I said, out loud, "I'm sorry. I've been running. I know you've been waiting." And I meant every word. I didn't give a polished speech. I didn't quote scripture. I just said what was real. I don't want to be half in anymore. I don't want to use your name as a safety net. I want to be yours, for real. That night, I repented. Fully. Not just from the habits or the substances, but from the distance. From the walls I had built between me and the truth. And for the first time in years, I felt clean. Not because I had earned it. But because I had finally said yes. After that night, everything changed. Not in a dramatic, movie-style way. But slowly. Deeply. For good. I started reading the Bible, not as a routine, but because I wanted to know the one I had seen, the one who had spoken. I joined a women's Bible study. I began to pray again, this time not just asking for things, but listening. Sitting still. And he kept showing up. I began writing music again. But now, the songs weren't about heartbreak or escape. They were about him. About what I'd seen. About the kind of love that follows you even when you run. I still had doubts sometimes. I still got tired. But I never went back. Because once you've heard your name in God's voice, nothing else sounds right. I'm 35 now. I live in a small town in Oregon, just far enough from the noise but close enough to community. I teach music at a local high school, run a voice studio on the side, and lead worship at a modest church that meets in an old building with creaky floors and a faithful few who show up rain or shine. But my real work happens in conversations. It's in the way I listen to a student who can't find their pitch, or the girl who won't meet my eyes until she realizes I'm not just grading her performance. It's in the questions I answer after youth group when someone lingers behind and says, "Can I ask you something weird?" It's in the late-night messages I get from old friends who heard through someone else that I had something happen. What I tell them is this: I didn't just have something happen. I met someone. And it changed me. Not just because it was beautiful, though it was more beautiful than anything I can describe. And not just because it was holy. Though every moment I spent in that presence left no doubt in my mind that God is real. It changed me because it demanded truth. It showed me who I really was, without excuses or distraction. And it showed me who He really is, bigger than religion, deeper than emotion, more present than breath. I study scripture every day now, not to prove anything, but because I want to recognize Him in the words. And He's there, everywhere. In Genesis, when light breaks into darkness. In Isaiah, when angels cry, "Holy, holy, holy." In Revelation, when the gates of heaven open and the book is read. I didn't understand those things when I was younger. I didn't think they applied to me. But now, when I read about the tree of life, I remember the power in that massive tree from my first death. When I read about the seraphim with many eyes, I remember the creatures near God's throne. I used to think they looked like aliens. Maybe they did. Maybe that's just what holiness looks like when we're not ready for it. It doesn't scare me anymore. People still ask if I'm sure what I saw was real. Yes. I'm sure. More real than this keyboard I'm typing on. More real than the cup of coffee beside me. Because realness in that place isn't measured by touch, it's measured by clarity. By the absence of doubt. By the weight of love so pure it silences every lie you ever believed about yourself. Heaven isn't clouds and harps. It's not white robes and quiet choirs. It's alive. It breathes. It sings. It pulses with purpose and joy and justice. It's not soft. It's not tame. But it's safe in a way the world never is. And God, He's not far off. He's not watching from a distance. He's not waiting to punish or scold. He's there. In the light. In the love. In the voice that called my name not to shame me, but to bring me home. And Jesus, He was standing. Not sitting. Not still. He was ready. Watching. Present. I didn't see a list of my sins. I didn't see judgment in His eyes. I saw recognition. He knew me. Every part. And He loved me still. That's what I carry with me now, not just as a memory, but as a responsibility. Because I know what it feels like to run. I know what it's like to numb yourself, to bury truth in noise, to believe you're too far gone. And I know what it feels like to be pulled out of that lie by grace that doesn't make sense. So I live to speak it. In songs. In words. In the way I show up for people who are still standing in the dark, not knowing there's light just beyond their reach. I don't push. I don't preach. I just tell the truth. Here's mine: I don't know if what I saw were angels, aliens, or something else. But I know what I felt. And I know who I met. Even when we run, He waits for us. And if you're still breathing, you're not too far gone.